Churchill is one of the greatest agents of the victory against Hitler, and nobody can dispute his enormous contribution to the struggle against Nazism. But for us the Greeks, he was the greatest tyrant.
Который своего врага уничтожал своим же врагом. Сталин был величайшим, не имеющим себе равного в мире диктатором.
Βόρεια Αφρική, αρχές του 1942. Οι Γερμανοί, με το περίφημο Africa Corps, προχωρούν βαθιά μέσα στην Αίγυπτο και απειλούν τα πετρέλαια της Μέσης Ανατολής. Οι πιο κρίσιμες ώρες του Δεύτερου Παγκόσμιου. Και αυτό τον ίδιο καιρό, χιλιάδες εμπειροπόλεμοι από την Αλβανία πολεμιστές εξαναγκάζονται να σκοτώνουν τον καιρό τους με παρελάσεις και παιχνίδια. Γιατί τον ελληνικό στρατό Μέσης Ανατολής οι Βρετανοί δεν τον θέλουν για τον πόλεμο. Θα τον χρειαστούν αργότερα, μετά την απελευθέρωση, για να μας φέρει τη νίκη και το βασιλιά.
Napoleon Zervas was to lead what became Greece's second largest resistance group, Éves. But Zervas only agreed to go to the mountains after being given a 48-hour ultimatum by the British, that unless he went, they would denounce him to the Germans as their agent. In the War Cabinet in November 1943, it was decided to destroy the power of Eam Elas leaders and to build up the power of Zervas, now a royalist. The British nominated the Liberal politician George Papandreou to be Prime Minister. In April 1944, Greek troops in the British Army in Egypt mutinied in support of this provisional government. Churchill instructed the British commander to put down the mutiny. After 10 days without water, the Greeks surrendered, and the British sent 8,000 of them off to prison camps in Sudan, Egypt and Libya. In the House of Commons, Churchill said, "There is no case in my experience, or at least wartime experience, where a British government has been so maligned and its motives so traduced in our own country by important organs of the press or among our own people." He defended his action by claiming that for 3 or 4 days or more, it was a struggle to prevent a hideous massacre in the center of Athens, in which all forms of government would have been swept away and naked, triumphant Trotskyism installed. Churchill instructed General Scobie, "Do not hesitate to act as if you were in a conquered city, where a local rebellion is in progress. We have to hold and dominate Athens, with bloodshed if necessary."
Well, I thought we'd come to liberate the Greeks, but within what seemed to be a short space of time, we were actually killing them. And more to the point, actually British chaps were dying in a cause that I couldn't quite understand.
The British had already begun sweeping operations and took their prisoners to the prisoner of war camp at El Daba in Africa.
Εγώ το βράδυ γυρίζοντας στο σπίτι πιάστηκα.
On my return home in the evening I was captured. Without going into details, I was caught and sent to Africa. I found myself at El Daba. We were 28,000 of us there, surrounded by barbed wire.
Σε αυτό την κοσμοσυρωή που βρεθήκαμε στην Ελντάμπα.
Among the mass of people in El Daba, there were all kinds of people.
Δεν είχαν καμία σχέση.
Most of them were not related to our movement. They did not belong to EAM. Let me tell you about a neighbor of mine who was a milkman. He kept chickens in his yard. This man never got involved in anything in his life. One day his chickens got out and he tried to fetch them back in. A detachment happened to be passing by, found him outside and picked him up as well.
The fact that collaborators were not arrested, were not condemned, was a gross affront to the left wing, was a gross affront to Elias, was a gross affront to all of us. There were collaborators up in Macedonia who got off scot-free. The collaborationist trials in Athens tended to be a farce.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Behind that line lie all the capitals of the ancient states of Central and Eastern Europe. Except in the British Commonwealth and in the United States, where communism is in its infancy, the Communist parties or fifth columns constitute a growing challenge and peril to Christian civilization.
In October 1944, he went to Moscow to firm up Allied plans for post-war Europe. With Stalin, he made what became known as the Percentage Agreement, giving Britain 90% influence in Greece in exchange for the Soviet Union having 90% influence in Romania. In good humor, Churchill tells Stalin, "It's a pity God didn't seek our opinion when he built the world." To which Stalin replied, "This was God's first mistake." At the Yalta Conference in February 1945, Stalin reconfirmed to Churchill that he had complete confidence in British policy in Greece. Churchill replied that he was much obliged to him for his attitude in this matter.